Fishing like a local isn't just about catching fish. It's about connecting with the environment and the people who call it home. It's about hearing the stories and traditions that have been passed down for generations and sharing unforgettable moments with the people you meet along the way. Fishing like a local is having an experience that stays with you forever. And with Fishing Booker, you can experience it too, no matter where you are. Discover your next adventure on Fishing Booker.
I'm Erica Lynn, and we all know the ocean is the most demanding environment on Earth, consistently testing the reliability and durability of our equipment. When you spend as much time fishing as I do, you know that reliable gear is essential for staying on the water. This is why I went with the Abyss battery to power my trolling motor, electronics, and outboard. The guys at Abyss Battery are rattling the saltwater industry by manufacturing performance marine batteries specifically designed for sonar, outboards, trolling motors, and electronic fishing reels. They're also Bluetooth compatible, so I found checking battery statuses right on your phone while you're out on the water is a huge game changer. To learn more about why Abyss batteries are used by the pros and factory installed by premier boat builders, visit abyssbattery.com.
Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together.
All right, so I'm sitting here and I am talking to JB Douglas. And JB, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself for everyone listening?
Of course, yeah. Hi, my name is JB. I'm a forager and a food maker. That's kind of what I like to identify as. I direct some of the culinary and community development work for Foraged Market, and then outside of that space, I do a lot of my own recipe development work with wild foods. And we've a couple little baskets, just spewing things that I do, but most of what I do is my work at Foraged, doing wild food recipe development, and then I'm in grad school right now for a master's in sustainable food systems.
So, sustainable food systems, what exactly does that entail? Are we talking like long-term vision for the environment, for people, for what does that entail?
That is a great question, and it's a lot of what the program is trying to dissect. So this is the first cohort of the program ever. It's at the Culinary Institute of America. So I've been looking for like a sustainable food or foraging or ethnobotanical program for a while. None that were like fitting my needs, but this program came out, which was exciting because it's like specifically through a culinary lens. It's not just like an ag program or not just like a public health program. So a lot of the preliminary foundational work that we're doing is around like defining systems thinking, and defining what sustainability means. Like, how have humans conceptualized sustainability throughout history? How do we conceptualize it today? What are the components that make something sustainable or unsustainable? And then how do you apply that framework to the mass entanglement and complexity of the global food system?
Politics, money, everything.
I kid about this, but it's not a joke. With like just about every week, the assignment will be like, look at this major world problem, dissect all the ways in which it is terrible, and then fix it. And then,
in a week.
This week, my assignment is to literally analyze like a whole variety of global and local food insecurity programs and hunger assistance programs, and then propose sustainable alternatives. So it is quite literally to solve world hunger this week. So I'll let you know on Monday how I've figured that out.
So, like, what's crazy about that? And you see a lot of people, and I think it's the wrong approach, but like giving meals to people in Africa. And when they do that, the food that they're giving them is not part of their regional diet, number one. Number two, it's going to cause long-term health problems. We've seen it. We've seen it with the indigenous here already, what we've done by giving them only certain staples to feed themselves on. I just find it fascinating and crazy, and it angers me at the same time. It's like, what the heck? Or the other thing, yes, the emissions and the greenhouse gases that are put off by all these commercial feedlots, right? Yes, absolutely horrible. Should we be doing it differently? Yes. How can you do it on a mass scale? Problem. But
Huge.
if you get other farmers on board, and the perfect example of this is white oak pastures. And I believe Will Winans or Waynans, something like that is the guy's name that started, but you know what I'm talking about, right? And the regenerative, well, actually, what does he call it? The Serengeti method, with the rotational and intermingling of certain species at the same time, and the effects that it has on the soil and the plants, the feed, everything about that place is the model of the way most farms should probably be ran. It's amazing.
Yeah. And it totally is. There are a lot of examples of small and mid-size and some large scale farms that are successfully doing that. But there are so many complex challenges.
I know.
Trying to scale it, right? Socially, politically. I mean, it just, every time you look at it from a different angle, there's another challenge. And so a lot of what we're doing is like trying to find the highest leverage points within a system to be like, okay, we've narrowed scope down to this thing. How do we effectually make a change here in a way that it will actually ripple out to other parts of the system? So, because we can't tackle everything all at once, right? Everything has 1,000 different problems at once. So I'm kind of focused in on the ways that wild foods and the wild food industry have the potential to create alternatives to mainstream food systems, and what we need to do as an industry to like move towards a sustainable growth of that industry that positively affects the environment, positively affects people and social lives and public health, and positively contributes to the economy. And that's a challenge, right?
So,
there's so much that goes into that.
Are we talking just like riparian, forests everywhere, or what are we doing? Just making like...
I think there's a lot of potential models and a lot we have to explore. What I do, so I can't say that I have like clear-cut solutions for like what we should be doing. Of course I don't.
But there's visions, right? Like there's a vision.
But there's visions. And I think that what I see as I've been, more and more immersed in the foraging community in America, and as I have my work at Forage, getting to talk to so many different foragers and forest farmers and small scale farmers all across the country, I see a lot of people that really care passionately and do amazing work individually. And we lack a lot of this broader organization or broader community structures that can really propel us forward. And I'm really interested in working towards some sort of organizational structure that allows us to communicate better, to share resources better, to advocate for just policy together, to partner with like park services to remove edible invasives, to do all sorts of different. There's like a whole plethora of projects that we as an industry, as a community, could be doing to positively affect change in the food system and in the environment. But we need some sort of structure that is getting us to a place where we can commune and organize together, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what
it kind of reminds me when you just said that, and we're going to jump back into that because there's a lot there, but
yeah.
So ivy, I honestly think somebody dumped like landscaping that they dug out, and they dumped their yard waste in a parking lot of one of the state parks that I love to forage and hunt in, especially that hunt area. And there was some like English ivy in there. And it has spread across the ground, shading out and killing off all kinds of native species. And every time I walk through there, one, it saddens me, and two, it makes me so mad. But I don't even know the proper channels to go about getting rid of it, eradicating it before it does even more damage. I mean, it's taken
Right.
up like an acre or more of landscape already. That's how, like, within a year.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And right. And I don't want to like, you know, like lump any like fault or blame towards whatever park services are managing that area. Like who knows what their
Right.
systems are, who knows what's on their radar. But you as like an individual who is, you know, pretty knowledgeable and cares about these things and has a personal connection to it, is nearby it, shouldn't feel like you hit a wall the second that you notice something happening like that. Like you should be able to like know what resources you have at your hands, or like a place to talk about it, or a place to report it, or a place for communication to move forward. Because we have all of these like citizen scientists and all of these conservation, like at-home conservationists all over the country who care about these things, but most of us are looking at our books and going to the woods by ourselves. And I think we have like just the potential is like insane if we were to just, you know, work together.
Yeah, I almost thought about a little guerrilla activity there, but
Yeah.
I know it's not the right thing, and I don't know. I'm going to go talk to the Park Service, though, and see what we can take care of and manage to do, because it's crazy the devastation that it's caused within, I mean, literally 1 year from the time I was there to went back to that area. And I was just astonished how fast the rate of, like, the growth rate was and how much it covered. And man, I can't imagine what it's going to be like in another year or two.
Yeah. Similar story. I was just back in California a month or two ago, where I grew up in Sacramento. And there's a pond right by my house growing up that I walked just about every single day after school growing up and in my teens. And I had like a rough understanding of what was going on there, but not as much knowledge as I have now. But I knew about the blackberry bushes. And then as I got into foraging, I was like doing some more research, and I was like visiting home again. I was noticing that they were Himalayan blackberries, and I was like, oh, these are not native. These are kind of aggressive. And then as I've continued to go back there, I'm only back there for a couple days a year. It's grown larger and larger and larger. And I go back there now with this whole new framework and understanding. And I can see, I'm like, actually, I've been watching this patch for 15 years. I can see how it's spread. I can see what native species it's choked out. I can see the ways that the beavers no longer have a place for their dam. I can see the way that it has like prevented these species from doing this, and now this algae is taking over here. And it's sad. Yeah, it's hard to look at. And we like, again, I want to feel like I can take action. And there's such, interesting actions to be taken there, considering that blackberries and blackberry leaves are all edible, and there's like so much potential function and use for those things in a way that would positively affect the environment and create food products for people. But we live in this culture, this structure where it's like, don't touch it.
Yeah, right.
And and the park services are notoriously difficult to get in touch with, and don't really want to talk to foragers. So
yeah, such an interesting dynamic there, which kind of rolls into what you previously mentioned, which was getting park services in different places to actually acknowledge the invasives and then consume them, or let us take them, right? And remove them. So let's go into that and kind of what you meant by that.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a vision rather than like a lived perfect plan, of course. Like this is something that has like been floating in my head for a while. There was there's a paper that came out, I think it was 2018, Balin Linnekin, I think it is. It's about wild food laws, wild harvest laws in America. And he specifically looks at the national park system, the 59 national parks, and looks at like the legality of the regulations that they've set out about foraging, and what it says about, what those regulations are rooted in. He tries to decipher how they're developed and why they're developed that way, tries to interpret why they change every year. And there's a lot of unclarity and confusion around it. But what he argues, looking at policy and what is put out by these park directors, is that foragers are, not seen as conservationists, and they're, not seen as they're seen as like a threat rather than like an asset. So what I'm interested in is like part of what I'm interested in is like working towards policy that legalizes foraging overall and works closely. And I think to do that, we have to work closely with park services and land management services, because we're on the same team. None of us want, 1,000 foragers going to the same park and stripping something that shouldn't be happening.
Right.
Like none of us want that. But I do think we have to open up the channels of communication to collaborate on projects. Like, for example, if someone in the South is like, I've got all this kudzu, like, let's assemble a team to like clear out. What if we like set up a supply chain to like a food incubator nearby, or like a co-packing facility that can then process all of those leaves into some sort of product? What if we start a mission to like eradicate Japanese knotweed in a certain section in the north? Why can't we use the manpower that we have in this community to partner with the service, eradicate that species, turn them into pickles and sell those to people, or give them to food banks? There's so much available to us, but we have really lacked, I think, from my perspective, we lack the organization to like make vision projects like that happen.
Yeah. So Japanese knotweed, can you really eradicate it?
Great question.
Through foraging.
Great question. Great question. Obviously, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be like gone tomorrow. But something that really like stuck with me one time, I wish I remember who said this, but they were like, if very evil people can nearly eradicate the American bison in, we have the ability to eradicate an invasive species. Like, it is not like, or at least to try, right? I'm not going to say, I'm not going to like purport that we can completely wipe out something that is like that invasive and regenerates that easily. But I certainly think there's value in removing a lot of it and turning it into food for people.
Yeah, man, the American bison, that whole thing. Whew. Okay.
Yeah,
there's a lot there.
Heavy.
We're not going to unpack that or unpack that at all. But yeah, no, I agree with that. That's what kind of worries me though about, there's so much gray now to where most people probably wouldn't care with foraging. There's so much gray area in most places, or some say, open to mushroom hunting, but it doesn't say, hey, you can't really take these berries that are growing there as well. There's no laws there in place now. It almost makes me wonder though, if you started playing with the laws in some places, it opens up, Pandora's box, and like, oh, wait a minute. Did you ever like think about it through that lens, or is it?
I understand what you're saying. I think by and large though, so there are certainly states and counties and parks with gray area laws. Totally. There are, and that is its own nightmare of a problem. But there are also a lot of states and parks and counties with prohibitive or highly restrictive laws that are based in racist policy, that it was like designed to like strip food sovereignty away from cultures, and were designed to keep specifically enslaved Black Americans from being able to, supplement the diets that they needed.
Keep them on a sharecrop or something. Oh, wow, that's
right. So I think that is anyone surprised that any bad law in America is there racism?
But that's what I was alluding to. Not like that, but it just seems to me anytime more regulation is brought in, if anything, it should be like, I don't know, it just seems like deregulation with protections or sanctions, some type of protections in place. That's exactly what for other things. Yeah,
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I'm really focused on. I'm focused on like the anti-foraging laws, the ones that are like specifically prohibited, that don't take into take into account that foragers are conservationists themselves and somehow imply that we can't work with environmentalists and park services to do good.
Right. No, I love that. So let me ask you this then. Ramps. Are you the one leaf guy, or are you, if they're tight clusters, are you thinning them?
This is so triggering to me because you say you're a forager, and that is like the first question. The second question is, do you know Alexis Nelson? But also like running. So I run do a lot of the social content for Foraged Market, and if we post a picture of a ramp and do not include a 30-minute lecture, we get reamed. Like, and so I'm a little scared to take a hard stance on this, but I will tell you where I'm at. I do think that there are problems in certain regions with ramps being overharvested. They take a long time to regenerate. I think that is a fair concern. I do believe that like there are times where maybe the one leaf is probably the best way to go for that patch, but I'm really resistant to any sort of strict or quantitative foraging guidelines.
Right.
I don't love the like 30% rule. I don't love the like the this or that, like the black and white of it. There is no substitution in my eyes for knowing the land intimately, walking it frequently, watching how species are behaving, and learning to tend that patch. Ramps are alliums, and alliums have bulbs that need space to grow. And if two bulbs are growing on top of each other, one should probably be taken away to thin the patch so that the patch grows back stronger.
Yes.
And but a lot of people are not ready to hear that. So
well, not only that, like not only are they not ready to hear it, but they don't fully understand because they don't truly have that connection. An armchair forager is different than somebody who actually develops a relationship, like you said, walking through, learning that land, knowing that land, recognizing and remembering weather patterns and things that have happened in the past and predictability of what's going to happen in the future. I intimately know some pieces of land so well that I can tell you where things are going or how good or bad it's going to be dependent upon the weather, right? That affects it, whether it's a flood year or it's a drought, and all those things need to be considered. And people just need to realize that unless they have that connection with the land or they're intimate with that piece, probably shouldn't speak up at all. They should shut the mouth, open the eyes, and let the ears and the eyes take it in, and then see and make a judgment. But it's one of those things that people are also greedy and over harvest and then let it spoil in the refrigerator. If I can't take it and preserve it or do something with it or consume it, I'm not taking it.
Yeah, that is one of, like, when I say I don't like the quantitative rules, like, this is one of those qualitative rules that I live by, which is that, like, even if I'm looking at it and there is a healthy patch of something and it's in peak harvest mode, if I do not, in the moment, know the exact thing that I'm going to do with it, this is me personally, if I don't know the exact thing I'm going to do with it, I do not harvest. I need to know, like, exactly what meal I'm going to put it into or exactly what preservation technique I'm going to use. I need to know what day I'm going to use it. Otherwise, like, there's no point to me. Like, it's the same method. I wouldn't go to the grocery store and just like grab food I didn't think I would cook through at some point. Like, I'm not gonna spend my money on that, and I don't need to affect that ecosystem. If I'm not gonna like actually utilize it. If it's an invasive, sometimes I harvest it anyways. But if I see some autumn olives, I might grab some before I know what to do with it. But aside from that,
yeah,
I'm really intentional before I pick.
And I feel like so many kids, and maybe they need Aesop's fables or something like that in their life to teach them that, because they don't have it. The people just don't have that sense of, responsibility to have the stewardship and say, you know, I want, but if I don't need it, then I'm not going to take it. And there's just that consumerism that society has built that keeps people wanting more and wanting it instantly, rather than, like we talked about earlier, just walking through the woods and not looking for one specific thing, but letting yourself just go within the moment and flow through and find things. And
yeah. And I'll acknowledge, like, there is definitely some privilege with that act. I am not food insecure, so for me, finding something in the wood, like not finding something in the woods, is not going to affect my ability to eat dinner that night. And so I think that there are some populations, some cultures, especially in America, that do need to like have like a different relationship to the woods when they go out there, if like that is a real food source for them, a main food source for them. But I think for a lot of us that are engaged in the space that are not food insecure, yeah, I agree that like consumerism really creeps in that, and it's hard to like shake yourself of that sometimes, because that's just so pervasive everywhere in America, right?
yeah, I think the only thing that I've ever seen as far as people that actually were pretty good stewards of the land, but for some reason overtook, was quail. I mean, you know what I mean? Because it was an ethical people. They lived off the land for the most part throughout the South, lived off the land and managed it to where they could continue to live off the land and harvest these different things. Typically did not over harvest. But with the quail, I think there might have been some other factors involved as far as fertility or some things, that the discoveries weren't growing and they're still using quail baskets and harvesting all these quail. And eventually, I mean, they're pretty much gone. Like, it's,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, this is an interesting, thing that you bring up around the like complexities of why people harvest or eat what they eat, right? It's not just never just about calories. Like, there are so many like social factors at play, economic factors at play, emotional factors at play, cultural history practices at play, that like weave this really complex web of like why someone wants to or needs to eat something in a certain moment. And it's hard to like detangle the ethics of any of those choices. Even you're like, oh, this thing is the environment is getting out of balance in this moment. We have to look at why, and that is like a really hard thing to solve for, you know?
Yeah. And that's like the bison. I mean, that's a pretty clear-cut answer.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
and it's sad. It's disgusting, and it's sad. A lot of people thought, they were just doing it for, the commercial aspects, and there's so many of them, right? And then you eventually just send out sharpshooters and waste them, and like that saddens me so much. It makes me think, though, like living here in Illinois, you have towns called Elk Grove, right? Why do you think it was named that? Because there were elk. And completely eradicated out. I mean, just the greedy man that came and did that. It's crazy. But it's all those different things. And then to see the resurgence of things, like in my lifetime, and I've mentioned it many times on the podcast, but it was just so cool to be a part of it as a child, to see the reintroduction of turkeys, and to see them flourish enough to where they opened up a hunting season for them. But now I'm noticing a decline, and I don't think anything's really being done about it now. So, it's one of those things we have to keep our eye on it. And honestly, I think it's agricultural practices that are impacting it. It's but nobody wants to hear that,
Oh, I would love to hear that. I just did a residency a few weeks ago in California, just touring a whole bunch of farms of all different scales and sizes. And I walked away with a much more complex view on what farms are doing in America.
The impact is ridiculous. Yeah. Not to mention just the fact that, like, I love fall, but I hate harvest season.
What? Why?
And I'm not talking like small scale harvest season. I'm talking, Ohio's the same way. Illinois is the same way. Commercial agriculture, big farms, how they're taking it out, throwing, toxic pesticides and herbicides into the air along with mold and everything else. And you can't even see sunsets because it's in the air. Like, that is crazy. That is not a sustainable model.
No. Like, not even a little bit. And what's scarier, I don't want to get too doomsday here.
Well,
but what's scarier is that, like, global populations are still growing, and we like literally can't scale those models. When we're saying it's not sustainable, like, yes, it is bad for the environment, it's bad for human health, it's bad for it's bad for everything. It's like already bad. But we literally can't scale it any further. Like, if we keep doing that, we're just more people will die and more ecosystems will get torn out.
But that's what I find. I find it crazy because
but it's hard to detangle yourself from that system as it's been built, because so much of that is for better. I mean, I'm not saying this is I'm not advocating for this, but or for the way the system is, the like global agricultural system is working right now. But it like feeds a lot of people, and we can't just strip those systems away without having major, even more hunger problems than we currently have. Like, the complexity of that is insane. And then you look at them in America specifically, we are losing, I think
on average, it takes about 30 days for a person to break their New Year's resolution. So if saving money was on your 2024 list, your odds aren't really looking that great. Luckily, I have a 100% guaranteed way to save you money this year. Just switch to Mint Mobile right now. Mint Mobile has wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. That's unlimited talk, text, and data for $15 a month. If you save as much as I think you're going to, you are going to be able to afford a brand new rod and reel. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. To get your new wireless plan for $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That's mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Pursuing wild game in wild places. Tune in to Hunt Stand Presents Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Waypoint TV, the destination for outdoor entertainment.
I'm sorry to throw out a fact that, like, without
understand
a source, but the most recent data that I looked at was we were losing about 2,000 acres of farmland every day in America for also development, whatever, sale or whatever, and we have like a decreasing number of farmers in America. So we're just like running out of land and people to produce the amount of food, like a higher scale of food, and it's like putting so much pressure on those big ag systems that are already a sustainable nightmare. And I think we have some big problems to fix fast.
So that's a rabbit hole in itself, because like, what's crazy is it's like 4 corporations are buying up the mass majority of the farmland.
Mm-hmm.
And but we're not going to even go down that road.
Yeah. This is not a farming podcast.
What was crazy is, so like you were talking about, like, we produce so much of it and stuff. But what I find insane is that we're subsidizing fuels because we have such a surplus of, grain, and then saying, yeah, these fuels are super cheap, but they're not actually cheap if you look at production costs and subsidization and everything else along with it. It's like, what are we doing? Scale it back, turn it into something that could be way more beneficial, and I think we'd be going down a better path. Like, why can't we figure out like a Cahokia situation?
And this is
because communal living isn't. I know.
No, but like, very fair and valid. I'll spare you the 10 extra rabbit holes around around food, but I do to bring it back. This is why I genuinely, honestly believe that we in the wild food space have the potential to like make an impact on things, like add alternatives to people's diets, contribute in positive ways. We just need to organize. We just need to be organized.
Absolutely. Well, that's like, okay, prime example, right? Farm raised or grown spinach on your average farm, and the nutritional value pretty much only comes from the crap they spray into the fields or put into the soil to grow these plants, right? And so everything is depleted within that. But yeah, you've got lamb's quarter out there. Better actually contains copper, which you need to break down magnesium and zinc and all these other minerals. And it's like, what are we doing with that? Like, what is going on here? Go in your yard. The fact that the government actually used to put out pamphlets during wartime and educate people on all these things, and then now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, that's a weed. You need to spray that and get rid of it, get it out of your lawn. And it's like, something is wrong here. It's broken. And the mindset, like, I'll talk to guys at work and they'll jokingly, but make fun of the fact that I do forage, or I'll bring in dishes and they'll all eat it. And then I'll tell them that it's foraged. And then so the next week it'll be like, oh, is that foraged? You know, a bagel or whatever as a joke. But it's like, that's how far we've become disconnected from it.
It's super interesting. I've been reading a few papers about the cultural interest and participation in foraging in times of war and in times of economic downturn. And it is really interesting to see how it was viewed, you know, early 20th century versus now. But this gets to a really interesting point about backyards and what's considered a weed. A couple of things. The first is that, like, that's not a uniquely American problem, but it is an American problem in a way that it is not in many other cultures. There are many other cultures today that are very normalized to grabbing what we consider weeds in their yard, or like having herb gardens in spaces that are like an American would never think to put a garden, right? And I don't think that everybody in America needs to forage in the woods every weekend. Like, I don't think that like everybody needs to like learn to forage, but imagine what we would have if everybody did have an awareness,
right,
of the plants that were growing wild in their yards. And even if that was just their greens for one meal a week, like that simplicity has the potential to make major impact, right? Like, I think we need like top-down ideas, and we also need those grassroots efforts, and educating people around weeds and all sorts of other plants that grow wild in their yard, and those fungi. That basic knowledge and understanding, the demystification of nature, I think, could have a huge impact on the way that people view food, buy food, eat food. And it's just like one of those like little things that I think the wild foods industry could be a leader on, you know?
Yeah. No, I hate the bad rap, or how did it even become labeled as a weed? They're plants. They're plants.
Yeah.
It's not a weed, it's a plant. And it has a purpose, whatever that purpose is. It may have been, you know, misconstrued or whatever, but like dandelions.
That one's crazy to me. So some of them I'm like, oh, like I love cleavers. I'm a cleaver. I'm an absolute cleaver fiend. Love a cleaver. I could understand why, like, if you're a farm and they are, you know, climbing up, entangling into your crop, making it harder to harvest. Like, if that data is showing like the yields are down because they are, you know, entangling with the crop, or even if you like, you know, have like if you're raising sheep and those like the cleavers get stuck in the wool, that decreases the value of it. It's harder to process. Like, I can understand where the eradication of them in certain spaces like is understandable, but I can't get past the fact that like they're still edible and useful and medicinal. Like I don't understand like why it became take it out and throw it away and not take it out and eat it, take it out and use it, take it out and share it. Like that, like the function of it is crazy to me. And dandelions never hurt anyone. I don't know why dandelions got the bad rap. That one is crazy.
Like they're the worst ever, though. Apparent, anything you see that's like a weed killer commercial or anything,
it's always a dandelion.
Yes.
and I'm like, that one's like, also if people like have any awareness of foraging, they're like mushrooms in the woods, eating dandelions. Like that I feel like that's like one of the top the top ones. It's like one of the first ones that people learn. It's like one of the ones that like, the weird family member that is like, oh, you're foragers or you eat dandelions. Like they know that dandelions are edible. I just don't understand why that one we'll never fathom.
Yeah, it's a pretty nuts thing.
That'd be
to
interesting.
See it like that.
That'd be an interesting interview. I bet we could track down who started the ad campaign for weed killers and chose the dandelion. Somebody out there made that choice 50 years ago.
It's a dandelion conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But so you kind of mentioned like the food and media aspect of what you do.
Yeah.
And then how does that like play a part in your foraging and what you're doing?
Yeah, so this is tied largely to my work at Foraged, and then also just kind of my outside work like as a creative person, like as an artistic outlet. I to create demand for these products, right? To support the people that are harvesting, to support the conservationists out there that are doing this work, the experimental forest farmers, like we have to create demand for their products. So I guess I should back up for 2 seconds and explain what Foraged does.
Yeah, let's go into that.
Yeah, and I'm realizing that as I start to launch into things. So Foraged is an online marketplace for wild and specialty foods. So you can think of it like Etsy, but for foraged and specialty foods. So foragers have shops on there, farmers have shops on there, and then anyone can go on, discover new products, discover new species, buy them directly from the forager, and it gets shipped right to their doorstep. So 90% of that money goes straight to the forager. We take a 10% commission, but most your dollars are going directly to them to support their livelihood and support what they're doing and what they care about. So it's a really cool model, something I am very deeply passionate about. I care about the proliferation of wild foods. I care about supporting small food businesses. I care about democratizing food access. And there's a lot that we have on the horizon to expand in all sorts of new ways that I can't wait to share with you when they come out. So part of my work on the culinary side of things is around the demand creation for the products, right? In the wild foods industry, like we all know dandelions, we all know how to cook them. Somebody that is like just learning that space may need to see pictures of dandelions being cooked, may need to see a couple different recipes in order to like feel assimilated into things, feel familiar with the techniques, have to be able to compare it against something that they've made before in order to like put those dollars through that forager. And like my hope is also like when they purchase ingredients from other foragers and cook with them and share them with their family, like that inspires them to engage with the woods themselves and learn more themselves. So I produce a lot of the food media for Foraged. So that's the recipe development work. That's like the copywriting around food content. It's the food styling and the photography and the editing. It's any like video reels and content we do. So sometimes when I'm foraging, it's for my personal stuff, like my personal life, right? And then sometimes I'm there with the intent of finding species that are properly sold by other foragers on the site, so that when I cook with that species and I do a video showing how to cook with it, and I craft a recipe that's designed to highlight its flavors or teach some sort of method about that species, that then people are inspired to put those dollars towards those foragers. So it's all about driving ways to educate consumers and to drive support for the people that are harvesting our food. So that's kind of like where my brain is at when I'm like foraging for media purposes.
So, quick question. Do you
Yeah.
ever worry about the foragers selling the products on there that they're doing unethical things?
Yeah.
Taking it.
This is a
It kind of just in my mind, I'm like, oh man, because there's some commercial foragers that I know that are super respectful. They do know the land, they have the relationship with it, and then there's some others that I've seen that just go traipsing through, ripping out, throwing it into a garbage bag, and taking it to your local restaurant and selling it. And it's like, oh, what are you doing?
This is a very fair question, and this is actually kind of one of the main things that we're tackling. So the first thing I'm going to say is that we have to date vetted every single forager that has come onto the site. We meet with them via Zoom. They have to fill out an application. They have to talk about their sustainable practices in that application. We meet with them over video chat. We walk them through the platform, and we like pretty strictly monitor what products they put on the site. So all those things are in place to begin with. I'll also say it's kind of been a non-issue because we have established ourselves as a brand that cares about these things, and we are ourselves foragers and farmers. Like we're not just some tech bros that are building an app.
Yeah,
like
right.
we are ourselves foragers and farmers. It's almost been a non-issue. The people that come to the site also ask those same questions and are really adamant about it and really care about it and are really earnest about it. And so it hasn't. We've only had to. It's been very rare that we've had to take corrective action, or we've spotted things that we had to ask questions about and open a conversation about. For the most part, it's been a non-issue, and I'm really proud that of the work and the people that we've been working with.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. So, you told like what Forage does and stuff like that, but so when you're developing something like right now, for instance, what are you looking forward to that you most likely want to create with, or want to use for inspiration for something?
Yeah, I'm really excited about what's coming up in the winter. So actually just today, well, I guess it'll have been out for a second when this episode comes out. We just released a new Rewild Your Holiday. It's like a mini digital cookbook that kind of walks through weaving some common wild species into classic holiday dishes as a way to again introduce people to wild foods in a familiar setting. So I'm a little fresh off of that still. My brain has been a little packed with that little project, and I haven't opened up to what's coming next. But this will be my first winter with Foraged. I started in February this year, so this will be my first winter proper, and I'm really excited to just sit down with the team and think through, ask our vendors what they've got coming up, what they want to see more of, and then strategizing what species do we need to highlight, where do we need to put our efforts and our focus to get more sales to you guys as vendors, and to educate the public in a way that feels fresh and exciting, but educational at the same time.
So in my head for winter stuff, I'm picturing soups, stews, something hearty, bone broths, amaranth sourdough breads.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I would love to do some more wild grains and breads. We haven't seen enough on the site to merit that those recipes yet, but I've been collecting my flours, and I've been experimenting here, and then I'm so excited to dip into that. Interesting that you mentioned soups and stews. I think that is right up the alley for winter, of course. What I hear when you say soups and stews is something that is really core to all the recipes that I develop, which is that they're meant to be shared. I think there is very rightfully an entire industry of food and recipes and meals that are scaled for one or two people. But the specialness of and the care and intent that goes into out when you're out in the woods, and you have that experience and you want to come home and share it with a friend or a family or a neighbor or your community. Or on the alternate side, if you're not the forager yourselves, if you've like gone out on a, maybe buying chanterelles from a local forager is like really new for you and super exciting. Like you want to have that moment of communion and that moment of sharing with your friends. So especially in winter, just like you said, the soups and stews, we're always scaling and thinking about what is the moment that it comes to the table and how is it being shared with people around you. I'm never like shooting things that are just in one little plate. It's always stacks of plates. It's always large vessels, because we know the importance of sharing in this community and in this space.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's can you share any of the recipes from the like rewilding your holiday stuff? Is that
okay. I think I would be happy to. I guess I should make an assumption about when do you think this episode will air?
Soon.
Okay,
very soon.
It was supposed to don't put this in. It was supposed to drop today.
That's fine.
It will it probably will drop tomorrow, but somewhere in the next couple days.
So it'll be out for about a week. Yeah. So
Great.
Perfect.
Perfect. I would be happy to share. So we've got it's a mini cookbook. There's like 7 full recipes in there. They reference a bunch of the other ones that are on the site. But these are 7 originals that have not been published anywhere else yet. Some of them are riffs on classic holiday dishes. So Victoria Granoff's Simple is Best dressing, which is like a really pared down but really well written recipe for like stuffing, like big torn croutons, big like rosemary, sage, thyme, parsley, like really classic herbs, and just some celery, a little bit of onion. So we're taking that, but instead of using croutons, we're using wild rice. So I'm adapting that recipe, learning how to accentuate the nutty flavors of wild rice, and adding in just enough herbs that it feels like has some of those classic flavors, but opening up all these possibilities for throwing in spice bush or carrot seeds or like there's this whole world of wild spices and herbs out there. And so I try really hard with recipes to give something that feels foundational, that is like highlighting one main thing. So in this case, the wild rice. It's based off of a classic recipe, so it's going to hit all of the same flavor notes that you're expecting to see. But then I work in these little moments of options. So I'm like, if you want to keep this classic, go in with that rosemary, sage, and thyme. If you're a forager yourself, or if you want to try something new, like try it with crushed sweet fern leaves and carrot seeds and some a little bit of yarrow or something. Like there's endless opportunities. So that's kind of like that's the first one that the cookbook opens with, and that's kind of the general structure for a lot of it. So we've got a cranberry sauce that you can is designed to be able to put in. I think it's a half cup of any wild fruit you've got. So I love doing cranberry autumn olive sauce. I trust it with huckleberries. It works with pawpaw puree. So just to give like that little extra interest and variety, and options for what you have access to, but it's still hitting that like big moment of sweetness, acidity, color, and like a hint of spice that you expect from the cranberry sauce on the table. So that's two of them. The other one I'll throw out in there that I'm really excited about is our autumn crunch pie, and that is a take on a classic. It's a take on a classic pecan pie. This was actually, I do too. I love pecan pie. But this recipe is a really great example of my experience foraging. I think a lot of people's experience foraging, where this entire community had to come together for this recipe to be created. So first, my coworker Emily was the first one that was like, I am really thinking about pecan pies this season, and we have a lot of vendors that do hickory nuts and have wild pecans. And I was like, that is a great idea. Let me dig into that and think about that. So I was able to get hickory nuts, Elliott pecans, from a couple of foragers on Foraged. I had black walnuts that I had bartered from a friend nearby. I had just come from California, where I had been experimenting with valley oak acorns, and I was making like acorn thumbprint cookies with them. That was really good. So I had these extra like bleached acorns from my place in California. And I had just gone chestnut foraging for the first time with a friend here, who very graciously took me to a spot and showed me his technique for taking them out of the husk. And so I had all these nuts from all these different parts of my life that came together to make this beautiful pie that was just like 5 different kinds of nuts. Looked so beautiful in the shot. It's like this whole range of colors and textures. And it hits those same important notes of that pecan pie, but it's from all these different wild sources. And so I developed it in a way that you can use whatever nuts you have on hand. Right. I did it with a bunch of different types. You can totally just choose one if you've got it. And then the other piece of balance that I kind of brought into play is in the filling that goes around those nuts. I tend to find like very sweet and cloying in a lot of pecan pies. So we've added in a little bit of miso and a little bit of apple cider vinegar. It's just like brightening things a little bit. It's giving that like extra little something of the saltiness in there. So not a revolutionary technique to bring in acid or salt into a dessert. But I think in this particular case, it like really mellows out that filling, and it takes it to a place where it's like a little salty sweet. So it's very much a dessert. It is very much a nut pie, but it's got all this other, story and oomph and possibility to it,
Yeah. So like right now in my head, I am picturing chestnut flour, acorn flour, and wild rice flour, gluten-free crust, maple sugar used for the pecan pie.
Yes.
And now it's a gluten-free pie and I can eat it.
This is one of the things that I struggle with the most when I'm doing this recipe development is often the goal to introduce one ingredient or introduce like one thing. Whereas I have this insane pantry of bizarre ingredients and I could go ham on this entirely wild pie, but I have to like narrow it in. But to your point, the sweetener in the filling is not corn syrup, it is maple syrup, because
perfect.
Again, we have a lot of
so
the ingredient list outside of the wild foraged ingredients are largely like just common pantry staples, so that you're really focused on just like understanding that one new ingredient or that one new piece of the puzzle, and you don't need to worry about sourcing an entire pantry of things. You don't need to worry about learning 10 new techniques. If you just want to get a store-bought pie crust, or if you have a favorite gluten-free pie crust, use that one. Absolutely use that one. But
maybe some duck fat instead of the butter for the crust. But
no, totally. That sounds so good. That is like a great little edge of savory in there too. Ooh, that sounds awesome.
I love food. My problem is I just never take enough time to create it. Like, I'll make some phenomenal dishes, but sometimes I just simple, get it cooked, eat it. It's going to be good anyway. Just highlight the natural, being of whatever it is, So
exactly. Yeah. No, totally. I think that's super important. I always say, like my goal when I'm treating an ingredient is either to transform it or to elevate it. I think both have like immense value. So if sometimes elevating it is just putting it on the plate as simply as possible and giving it all the attention it deserves with the least amount of ingredients possible, right? And sometimes elevating it is an entire complex sauce underneath it, right? You never know. I think it's equally valid to transform it beyond what people expect it to look like, right? Turning something into a syrup or a puree that you never usually see pureed before, as a way to like see that ingredient in a new light. I think both transforming and elevating are equally powerful, and I think that it's totally valid and fair, and also really important to do simple cooking like that sometimes. I think that is like some of the best cooking in the world is super, super, super simple.
Yeah. I just made a braised pot roast the other day, and acorn oil is what I was brushing on it. So now
Nice.
it has this like strange, like almost orange kind of glow to it when it's like I'm eating the leftovers and you heat it up and your mashed potatoes underneath, which would be awesome if it was like Wapato or something. But, working with what I got.
Totally. Is the acorn oil from Sam Melissa?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is.
I don't have oil press, but actually I've been looking. I might end up buying one. But
that's on my Christmas list.
Yeah,
for sure.
But it's been awesome talking to you. I imagine we could probably continue on forever.
Yeah.
But before we go, if you could just kind of tell everybody where they could find your content, reach out to you, all those great things, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. The best way is through Instagram for sure. I'm at jbdouglas.food. You'll see like GIFs and little fun pop art versions of the wild food that I create there. And I'm pretty responsive on there. Please DM me, let me know, get in touch. The other best way to support what I do is to check out foraged.com. That's foraged.com. Again, when you shop there, that money is going directly to the foragers, the farmers, and the small food makers, the herbalists, and soon to be hunters and fishermen as well. So it's going directly into their pockets, and that is like the best way to support me and the work that I'm doing. We're a small team. There's just 4 of us on the team making everything run, and we're really all about making the lives of these foragers better. And the best way to do that is to check them out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing and educating us. And it was really unique and interesting conversation and kind of all over the place, but at the same time, somehow it all came together. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Lucas.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.
You want to succeed, you want to fish, you want to be one of the greatest.
Tune in to West Marine's Life on the Water, presented by Costa Custom Boats, every Saturday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV.